Even as the 21st century gets underway, we still have a lot to learn about our world. Fascinated and bewitched by the legends of the sea, men set off each day to explore it, to get as near as possible to the big sharks. These superb predators that awaken our deepest anxieties. The often unexplained behavior of these age-old creatures has aroused the curiosity of scientists the world over, and they have kept them under close surveillance since the Second World War. One man, Graeme has decided to approach them at close hand without protection. A face-to-face between two super predators, in the course of which we will get to know these big sharks of sinister reputation. So before they disappear, the victims of humans, it is time to overcome our fears and to learn as much as we can about these mysterious giants.
To me, the character of a tiger shark is far more enigmatic than a great white. They're very much harder to work out. They don't give you access to see them from the surface. You can't stand on a boat and watch a tiger shark for an hour and a half to try and gauge its aggression on any given day. You actually have to get in the water and start interacting with it.
Torn between apprehension and curiosity, diver and professional cameraman Graeme has decided to get up close to these animals we know so little about.
The tiger shark definitely rates, maybe not on the same level as the white shark, but very close. Being far more mysterious, eating wider variety of things, including junk that floats on the surface of the sea, far more indiscriminate feeder than a great white, and a big, powerful, aggressive shark. If a tiger shark rushes at you and you're lucky enough to actually see it, the only thing you can do is try and swim at it as fast as possible. Throw your arms out, look as threatening as you can, take your snorkel out, scream in the water. If you have a camera housing, just try and get the camera housing between you and the shark. The other side of the coin is you probably won't see it, in which case your tickets. To me, a tiger shark is like a bouncer outside a nightclub. They exert themselves, but you've got to be careful which nightclub you're at and which bouncer you're dealing with. And they're obviously big and strong, or they have some sort of hideous skill that you're not aware of, but you've got to work around that. I think the tiger shark is a very successful animal, and it's obviously the form of the tiger shark has remained unchanged for, I can only guess and say, hundreds of thousands of years. Because to me, it's a very efficient survivor. It's a natural scavenger. They spend a lot of time on the surface looking for food. They don't necessarily have to kill to eat. They've got a very diverse diet.
This species of shark is unique in having 7 gills on each side. The ancient-looking fish has undoubtedly evolved little over millions of years. By the Cretaceous period, around 100 million years ago, certain species of shark had probably already assumed their modern form. Recently identified primeval sharks still inhabit the oceans. Bernard Serret is an ichthyologist and a specialist in sharks. He works at the Institute of Research and Development at the National Museum of Natural History in Paris.
The oldest sharks can be recognized by their scales, that we call denticles when referring to sharks, by their teeth, by their skulls, and the imprints in the fossil beds. The oldest teeth that we have date back to 400 million years ago. We have a skull that was found in Antarctica, and that dates back from 380 million years ago. And the form, the oldest imprint of what looks like a shark, is that of the Cladocelicus, which lived about 360 million years ago. And we consider that to be the originator of the current species of sharks.
Even today, the time and place that sharks first appeared remains a mystery. Scientists agree, however, that they have likely evolved very little over hundreds of millions of years. The shark's earliest ancestors probably took many forms, but it was only after a long period of evolution that so-called modern sharks appeared. As sharks have no bony skeleton, but only cartilage, it is practically impossible to find evidence of their early forms or habitats. Nonetheless, a few fossilized specimens and a few teeth have helped shed light on the mystery of their evolution. One of the ancestors or cousins of today's shark was the megalodon. 25 million years ago, it was the super predator of the tropical oceans. Morphologically very close to the white shark, its teeth measured 18 centimeters, and its length was estimated at 20 meters. A nightmarish creature which still might be lurking in the depths. Persuaded that regular contact with humans modifies the behavior of wild animals, Graeme decided to go to Rocky Bay in South Africa to participate in a group dive.
I always find it fascinating being involved in a tourist group that goes shark diving. And with tiger sharks, it's even more so because of the reputation that they have. And of course, tiger sharks are legendary animals. They're one of the big apex predators in the ocean. And on this part of the coast, they're the equivalent of the great white in the Cape. It's the big shark to see. If you say you've scuba dived with a tiger shark, it does a lot for your reputation.
Keith Rousseau, along with Mark Addison, is in charge of a center that has been organizing dives with tiger sharks for 15 years. Even though they dive without cages, there has never been an accident.
Okay, super. Tell me, what's the current and visibility like there? Yeah. So you say that's 10 clients, eh? For Friday.
What I really wanted to see with Keith's scuba diving operation was the behavior of the tiger sharks in amongst a whole group of people. I've never seen that before with a big shark. If it was a great white, there's no ways the shark would come near that group of people. It would be too scared. Now, what I wanted to see was what the effect of that was on the sharks and how close they would come.
Graeme is curious to see if these people have come to Rocky Bay motivated by fear, fascination, or recklessness. After all, tiger sharks are the second most dangerous species to man. How do they tolerate this intrusion into their territory?
I think a lot of people inevitably want to face their fears in some way or another. And I think even if there's no phobia of the shark, I mean, divers have always been afraid of sharks.
And I'll give you guys a quick briefing and then we can head out.
Maybe it's the fact that all their friends have done it and now, now it's their turn, that's the pressure on them to go and do it. Or maybe it's just a personal thing, maybe it's just a fascination with the animal. People arrive feeling a little bit apprehensive and they never want to say too much, and you'll ask them how they're feeling and they'll go, yeah, well, we're not so sure.
This will be my first shark experience. So
oh, really, yeah?
Hopefully a close encounter.
Yeah? Don't you get scared?
Well, maybe a little, but I don't know. A little fear is a good thing.
Yeah, it is.
Healthy.
But then, once you've done the dive, it's almost like a complete transformation.
Okay, guys, just to give you a quick outline of what Blue Wilderness is involved with, it's a lot more than just the shark diving and the sardine run and that.
Well, I think the people that are running this trip have been doing it for a long time and they know tiger sharks, and I don't believe that, we're not the natural food of a tiger shark.
We do a lot of research work, and what we're doing is tagging the animals, and
people come in one type of person and they leave a completely different character because of that experience with the shark.
What will happen is, if there's a tiger shark in the area, chances are we won't even see her. She'll come in, have a look at you, turn around and swim away. all right?
I think everybody who comes to do this dive has fear, and that includes myself. And every single time anybody gets in the water with a big shark, there's the possibility of something going wrong.
Again, being wild animals, please don't try and hang on the animals. I get a lot of guys that want to pull their tails and that. They don't like it at all. All right.
I think there's definitely a mood of tension, and I think it's that concept of the shark in their head that's scaring them.
Keith has patiently taken the time to explain how the diver must behave faced with these apex predators. He has learned after years of experience that people know very little about the size or dangerousness of sharks.
The great white shark.
The great white.
I think they grow up to about 8 or 10 meters or 12 meters. I think, I'm not too sure.
It's the biggest, the most frightening. It's the basking shark. They can weigh up to a ton, more than a ton.
I think the tiger shark the biggest. Hammerhead shark?
Oh, well, that is the orca, the big white shark.
The whale shark, I think.
I don't think all species are that dangerous, but as far as I know, the great white shark is the most dangerous one.
There are sharks that are more docile than others, like us.
The world of sharks is complex and diverse. The 460 species known today of sharks of all sizes, shapes, and colors probably account for only a third of their total number. Each species has adapted to its environment, or has settled in to an environment that suits it. While some like deep water and the prey that hide there, others prefer to roam near the surface. The great diversity among sharks has allowed them to conquer all the seas of the globe, except the Antarctic, from the great depths to the shallow waters of the Bahamas. In the Bahamas, the University of Miami has established the Shark Lab of the Bimini Biological Field Station in order to study the biology and conservation of sharks. Dr. Samuel Gruber and his team are totally devoted to their work.
No, we want to get him in that corner, so just let him go through. Now go back to that corner. Most people think of sharks as one thing, this death fish from hell, this man-eating monster like Jaws. But in fact, because of their 500 million years of independent evolution, they are highly, highly diverse. That means that there are all kinds of sharks that occupy all kinds of habitats and have all kinds of shape. But the thing is, they're a very small group. For example, there's only about 1,000 species of sharks and rays, but there are 25,000 species of fishes.
While some measure no more than 25 centimeters in length and weigh only 10 to 30 grams, there is one in particular that stands out for its impressive size, the whale shark. Though it is hard to believe, this massive animal that can reach a length of 15 meters and a weight of 12 tons feeds exclusively on tiny plankton. Like other sharks, it grows continuously, but more slowly. While feeding preferences and physical characteristics vary from one species to another, they all have some things in common: rough skin, dorsal fins, and powerful jaws. Their hydrodynamic form makes them excellent swimmers, able to reach speeds up to 60 kilometers per hour. However, unlike bony fish, sharks have no swim bladder, but instead an enormous liver rich in oil, which gives them their buoyancy. While some, like the deep-water sharks, are forced to swim continuously in order to breathe, most are capable of breathing by using their gill muscles. Another solution consists in lazily resting on the ocean floor and letting a strong current do the work.
And this is sort of sensational because, like many other aspects of shark physiology and anatomy, they have mammal-like features. That's what makes them so different from fishes. Because while the bony fishes have been around as long, the sharks and bony fishes are on different evolutionary paths. Sharks are not fishes, and they do have adaptations like their kidneys, like their heart, like their reproductive mode, like their eyes even, that are more highly evolved, or at least not highly evolved, but at least look like mammalian structures.
Sharks form a very distinctive group among fishes and possess some surprising characteristics. Some of their habits are similar to those of mammals. Their mating habits, for example, which resembles that of felines. Although the male has 2 sexual organs, he only uses one when mating. As for the female, she has very thick skin, which gives her a chance of surviving the violent assaults of the male. The ability to choose a mate has probably favored natural selection and allowed sharks to survive over the ages. Sharks are found everywhere, along the coasts and in the deep sea, but most live on the continental shelf at depths of 0 to 200 meters. Though most of them prefer warm or temperate waters, some are known to brave the icy waters of Greenland. The great white sharks, like the mako sharks, are able to regulate their body temperature. This allows them to move from cold water to warm water and follow their prey according to the seasons. Surviving in the ocean depths is a difficult challenge, and sharks often choose to take refuge along the coasts in warmer water where food is abundant. Some go so far as to swim up freshwater rivers in order to find food. In this search for prey, it is possible they communicate with each other in order to hunt more efficiently. When living in groups, special characteristics such as black-tipped fins or stripes along their sides probably allow individuals to be identified. Even today, with the accumulation of scientific knowledge, the great diversity of sharks makes them difficult to study. It will probably be many years before we discover all their abilities. The warm waters of the Bahamas often provide a refuge for sharks. Dean Grubbs and his team take advantage of this fact to study their behavior.
Most sharks are highly specialized. on certain types of prey. Now, there are some, like our Caribbean reef shark, that are specialists on primarily fish, and they'll eat a wide range of fishes, and if they can catch it, they will eat. But there are others that specialize on eating crabs and have, or lobsters, and have teeth that have evolved specifically to target those type of prey.
Sharks are predators whose lives seem to have evolved around their jaws and their teeth. These unbelievable jaws optimize the ability to seize prey on the run or dig it out from behind a rock. Powerful and attached to the skull by ligaments, they allow sharks to swallow very large prey. The teeth are arranged in rows and embedded in the gums. The first rows do the work, and the back rows provide replacement teeth when needed.
So you can imagine 60,000 teeth per shark, 250 billion sharks. For 500 billion years, there's more teeth down there than stars in the sky.
Sometimes the biggest problem with doing the shark dive is not actually managing the sharks, but managing the weather. And it's never a nice experience to be on the sea when it's really blowing. One of the funniest things for me is when the divers are ready to jump in the water and the bait's had its effect, there's always a couple of sharks swimming around the boat and thrashing on the surface. And you see the scuba divers looking into the water with a lot of doubt in their faces.
While the first sharks to arrive are thrashing around the boat, the divers must jump into the water without even knowing what monsters may lurk beneath the surface.
But once you jump off the boat, there's a lot of bubbles, and once that clears, all you see are sharks. There's black-tip sharks, dusky sharks, and if you're lucky, a tiger shark.
An impressive creature comes our way. Keith has named her Betty. She is a female tiger shark that is used to being around divers. She has been tagged and her movements are being studied.
The scuba operation relies heavily on a baiting station, which is deployed south of Aliwal Shoal, and a fairly large amount of pilchard and pilchard oil is put in the sea. Not a lot of solid food for the sharks, but a lot of scent to bring them in. And any shark that's in the area swims up the slick and ends up at what Keith will call the stem. I don't think the sharks are associating the scent of the food with the fact that the humans are actually on the menu. I think it's more the fact that people just happen to be there when they get the smell of the food. The divers drift in a very controlled way next to the stem, and they always keep that in their sight, and that's the way that Keith controls the dive, which works very, very well. So the scuba divers will all descend, and they normally stick in a very tightly bunched group, sort of in defense mode, backs together, looking up. And it's quite intimidating when you're first in the water, especially if you're a first-timer like most of these scuba divers are. They suddenly realize that they're in this amazing environment with all these predators. I was really surprised with the fact that the tiger shark swam so close and almost in amongst the divers. I really find it hard to believe that that's a natural behavior. I think that's definitely a behavior that's been picked up by sharks that have been habituated in a baiting situation with lots of people. The shark was incredibly relaxed. The tiger sharks just swim right at the guys, turn away very gently, swim around somebody else, swim through the group, and it did that a couple of times. I mean, I think it's a good thing from the sense of education and revealing this creature of fear to people on a personal basis. The fact that Keith and Mark have been doing that for 10 years and they've never had an incident with a whole lot of bait, tiger sharks, and a whole lot of people in the same area says a lot for the shark and says a lot for the method by which they introduce people to those sharks. If you're looking for wild shark behavior, my sense is that's not typical wild behavior that you're seeing in that situation. As soon as that eye contact is not available, things then start going wrong. And being on the surface, floating, whether it's on a board, small boat, or a canoe in the evening, could be a really, really dangerous situation.
On the 26th of July, 1945, the American cruiser Indianapolis unloaded the 2 atomic bombs that would soon destroy Hiroshima and Nagasaki onto the Pacific island of Tinian. A few days later, the ship was torpedoed by a Japanese submarine in the Philippine Sea. Of the 1,196 men aboard, 900 survivors found themselves floating in an area well known for sharks. It was 4 days before they were spotted. Only 316 of them survived this nightmare. More than 60 years have passed, but the incident is engraved forever in the memory of Harlan Twibble and Victor Bucket.
It became evident to me that this ship was going to sink, and I gave the order to abandon ship, and I yelled, "Abandon ship." Nobody moved. They all stayed where they were. Then I said, "Follow me." I yelled at the top of my lungs. I went into the water, and the men followed. As soon as I got into the water, I said to the men, "Swim away, swim away."
It was very unpleasant, and the ship sunk in 12 minutes. So it didn't give many people a chance to get off that ship.
My big ambition was to stop these men from killing themselves, because if they did the wrong things, they could not survive. The sharks came the second day, and I noticed, the first thing I noticed was they didn't bother the big group.
Because the people that wandered off and went off on their own, and some of them did, they never did come back again.
I also noticed that the sharks would attack only those who broke loose from the group, and I told the group that. I said, you break loose, chances are you're going to be attacked by a shark. I've learned later, much later, that really a blessing and also a curse was the fact that we were losing men on the hour. We'd lose some people, and their bodies, I would take their life jackets off them, the bodies would drift out to sea. And we found out later that probably the sharks left us alone because they were eating the dead bodies. So we're fulfilling their spot in life of being scavengers of dead bodies.
That starts a frenzy with the sharks. Once the blood is there, the sharks get worse, and there's nothing, of course, you can do about it. You're like a sitting duck there.
I don't believe that there wasn't anybody that wasn't wounded, because that ship blew up, and when you blow up a big ship with all that metal, you're bound to get hit by a piece of it. So just about everybody bled. We were fortunate, some of us, I was one of them. The bleeding stopped, and I didn't bleed to death. Other people, I assume, probably did die of bleeding. I only saw one man that I thought was dead, killed by a shark. He was an ensign who didn't obey the order that I gave to stay attached to the nets. And he swam off towards the Catalina, which was the flying boat that landed in the water after they discovered us. And he started swimming towards them, and he was pulled down, and I've always assumed it was a shark pulling him down. I don't know whether it was or not, but I think it was.
I had a shark actually swim through my legs, and I'm telling you, that was one scary time, believe me. One thing that I think helped me a great deal was that I was fully clothed, and I think that was a big advantage for me, because I think most of the sharks went for people who had no clothing on, and they could see the flesh, and they could see the whiteness of the legs and the people dangling in the water.
The psychological effect was devastating. You could look out there and see all of these fins in the water, and you wonder, what are they going to do next? Well, the actual fact was that the sharks didn't attack our group.
No one will ever know what really happened during those 4 horrific days. Each survivor had his own memories and explanations. Of all these apex predators, only 2 species have been known to attack men lost at sea. They are the oceanic whitetip and the tiger, both of which are fond of offshore waters. These sharks have a reputation for being carrion feeders and are large enough to swallow a human body. Since the day those sailors were saved and brought aboard the hospital ship Tranquility, the American Navy has decided that such a nightmare must never happen again. After the Second World War, a research program was started to learn as much as possible about the behavior of big sharks. It was essential to understand what the crew of the Indianapolis had endured.
The research goes on. But the emphasis today is on studying the many species of sharks, on learning enough about these animals and their habits to outwit them. Much of the research is sponsored by the Office of Naval Research, which has many questions to ask. How far away can a shark smell blood?
The early experiments were similar to those conducted today.
Right, we're rolling. Okay, picture's coming through pretty good. Recording.
Ingenious devices were invented to keep the sharks at bay or to immobilize them if necessary.
The scientist himself tests his shark screen. It not only screens the man from the shark, but conserves body heat and keeps any blood away from the animal. They developed a CO2 gun to inject gas into a shark to disturb his equilibrium.
The possibility of a tiger shark feeding frenzy really makes my blood run cold. I think it's probably the most terrifying situation you could ever be in. Whether you're a shipwreck survivor or a diver or a surfer or anybody that uses the ocean, the thought of 5 or 6 big tiger sharks competing for one prey item, in one way I would love to see it, but in another way I hope I never do.
Accompanied by his friend Chris Coates, Graeme Duane has decided to go to a site where tiger sharks are not used to having their territory invaded by humans.
So Chris, yesterday we had a dive with the tourists, with the tigers down at Ellerwell. And the The sharks actually swam in between the people without even batting an eyelid. Well, I think what we will see is a completely different story. I think there'll be a lot. What I would really like to do is find another place where there are tiger sharks that are not habituated. Having seen the scenario with the scuba divers and the baiting stem and how relaxed and approachable the tigers are in that situation, I would really like to get into the water with a wild population of tiger sharks and just see how close they come and how relaxed they are with you. Show them who's in charge of the situation as much as we can. We're going to work in a very remote location. It's far from any sort of medical help. It's way up the coast. People don't scuba dive there. There's not a lot of human pressure in the area. And there are obviously a lot less people using the sea. And in the case of this particular location, nobody scuba diving. When you go out to sea, you're very much on your own. If something goes wrong, you've got to sort yourself out. You've got to be able to get yourself back to the beach and get help in your own capacity. The area where we're hoping to dive, it's very deep. It's 40, 50 meters deep, so you can't see the bottom. So these sharks can come up at you with a fair amount of speed, and I really need somebody to be looking down underneath me, and you really need two eyes in the water.
As usual, Graeme prepares to free dive, which demands caution and concentration.
From my own perspective, every time a shark swims at me, I get a little flutter in my chest. That'll never ever go away. If I have 1,000 sharks swimming at me every day in a row, I'll never get used to that feeling of adrenaline. It's a term of respect, I think.
Professional divers generally attract sharks simply by throwing bait on the surface of the water. But in the vastness of the ocean, how do sharks sense a potential prey or a human?
Well, they can smell blood from far, so like even if you hurt yourself in the sea or something, then they'll smell that because they have a sharp sense of smell.
Movement in the water?
We're not fishing the water, so we're a little bit awkward.
I would say that they prey. They prey. So they would go around, just seeking wherever, and yeah.
I understand they also can sense an electrical field.
Left side.
They don't have too good eyes, I've just heard, but I'm not sure what they really do to find me.
Shark specialist Bernard Serré has an explanation for the tragedy of the Indianapolis.
When a ship sinks in the middle of the ocean, a number of stimuli are released, whether they be auditory, olfactory, or visual, into the immediate vicinity, and the sound of the explosion can travel very, very far.
Also at the Bimini Research Center, Professor Kajiura conducts experiments to identify the shark's senses.
If you were to take a shark and determine what it can hear underwater and compare it to a human, if they were underwater, the sharks would hear a lot more of the low-frequency sounds and would not be able to hear the higher frequencies that humans would be able to detect. There's a clear difference in what the sharks are hearing underwater compared to what we would hear if we were to stick our head underwater.
Okay, let me just move this electrode a little bit more medial.
The first sense activated is hearing, particularly of low-frequency vibrations at a distance of up to 2 kilometers.
Then there is everything that can be considered olfactory. When a ship sinks, there are people in the water and they have certain odors. And of course, certain products can produce olfactory trails that a shark can detect from quite a distance.
What we found for the sharks' olfactory capabilities is that, yes, they are very sensitive to odors, but the idea that if someone was in the ocean and would have some sort of injury and would be bleeding, that person would attract sharks, that's probably not at all true. I mean, when you consider the total volume of seawater in which that person is located, that blood would dilute out to non-detectable levels very quickly.
The sense of smell is highly developed in sharks. Professor Kajiura injects blue-tinted fish blood into a tube inserted in a shark's nostrils. The reaction is impressive and demonstrates their ability to detect an injured prey. A similar experiment is conducted with red-colored human blood. The little shark reacts, but much more weakly.
Are you ready?
The idea that sharks are attracted to human blood is probably not strongly supported. Recall that sharks feed, for the most part, primarily on fishes, and so they're optimized to detect, the scent of a fish. Human blood is probably stimulatory. They probably can detect it, but they may not necessarily associate that with a typical sort of prey item that they would normally be eating.
To test the other senses, he goes to the shark lab, where he is met by Katie, one of Samuel Gruber's team. After demonstrating that sharks are very sensitive to fish blood, he wants to know what provokes an attack in a natural environment. To find out, he will place some small transparent plates connected to tubes emitting blood into an enclosure containing several lemon sharks.
Right about here? Yeah, right about there is great. Okay. Just sort of squish it down onto the seafloor, step on it. That's great, perfect. Good job.
After a few seconds, the blood, dyed pink for the experiment, does in fact attract the sharks, which begin milling around the plates, but there is no attack.
Tiger shark, when it's hunting, goes through the same concentric circles of picking up potential prey. It'll smell something in the water and it'll swim up current or upwind towards the source of that smell. Once it gets eye contact of the potential prey item, it spends a lot of time trying to get a reaction from the prey item. Obviously, real prey will take fright and swim away, which I think will instigate a chase on the part of the tiger shark. If there's no reaction, the next circle in is a bite or a bump or a feel, just to find the texture of whatever it's wanting to eat. And if that's pleasing to the shark, I guess then it'll just plow in and start taking big bites out of whatever's floating.
This is a system of receptors that are just under the surface of the skin, and it enables the shark to detect something like a little fish swimming away. So even if the fish was swimming beside the shark without actually touching it, the water that the fish would displace with its tail would be detected by the shark and enable the shark to localize the location of that prey item.
Sound vibrations are also picked up by a special organ called the lateral system, which extends all the way down the shark's sides. Consisting of a series of sensory canals, it allows sharks to detect water movement and therefore the movements of anything in its vicinity. The scientists like to call this particular sense remote touching. When a prey buries itself in the sand or hides under rocks, the sharks detect it anyway because they possess electrosensitive receptors.
All living organisms in seawater generate an electric field around their body naturally. And the sharks are able to detect this electric field. So even if that little fish, say, were to bury under the sand where you couldn't see it and no smell, didn't make any sound, no other senses were involved, the shark would still be able to detect the electric field emanating from its body and be able to dig that prey up out of the sand and consume it.
Thanks to small Lorenzini ampullae located on their snout, they can detect any motionless living organism.
You could think of this sense as like sort of like a shark metal detector. He's searching along the beach for lost coins or jewelry the same way a shark would search along the sea for buried crabs and fish with its electrosense.
To demonstrate this ability, 2 electric transmitters are placed about 20 centimeters from the blood-emitting plates. The olfactory stimulation causes a certain swimming pattern. Then the shark becomes more and more agitated.
Closer to get, right there, look, bite, clear bite, excellent.
They attack the electric transmitters. This experiment demonstrates that shark attacks' source of electricity. One can imagine that the 900 survivors of the explosion of the Indianapolis, terrified by the situation, emitted signals highly attractive to the sharks.
I think sharks can sense fear to a certain degree. If you retreat suddenly from a shark that's swimming towards you, their eyes seem to sparkle all of a sudden. It's like rolling a ball of string in front of a cat. The ears prick up. It's like a natural instinct to advance on something that's retreating from you. If you're floating on the surface and you're moving in a frenetic fashion, I think the shark will definitely pick up on those movements.
So they are able to hear, smell, feel, see, taste, and detect movements and electrical fields. Once a year, sharks gather during the sardine migration off the South African coast. All their senses alert, the excitement overwhelms them and provokes a veritable frenzy.
I think the argument that sharks have this suite of excellent sensory modalities which enables them to be perfect predators needs to be re-examined. Every organism is a perfect predator for its environment. And the sharks do very well in their environment, and I think a lot of it is due to their sensory modalities. But we need to be careful that we don't assign their perfect predator status to their senses. It's a composite of everything that makes up a shark.
If animal intelligence means an ability to adapt to new situations, then sharks are more intelligent than we thought.
What I've learned from these 2 diving scenarios that I've experienced is that these sharks are very clever, calculating, and efficient predators in the ocean. They learn very quickly, they're very good at what they do. The sharks tend to swim much faster at you, and as soon as you get eye contact with the shark, they'll turn away very quickly. The wild sharks will come close to you, but not for long. They like approaching from the bottom. It seems to be a habit where they'll swim vertically right up, have a look at you, and then bank away gracefully like a big aircraft. It's a far more dangerous situation because it's much harder to read the unpredictable behavior of that shark. They're obviously not used to seeing humans. They don't know what we are. They don't associate us with anything. I think there's a part of their mind that's saying, what am I looking at? Is it possibly something edible? And that's a different situation to the Alawal Shoal, where the sharks know where the food is and they know what the people are. And for that reason, you can never be off guard when you're in the water with a tiger shark. And I think if that relationship can be maintained, I think that's a perfect place for us to be.